Right. So, wanted to make a video today because I was doing some research and I was on social media and I was watching the news. Um, and I saw where Joe Biden came out with his economic plan. Um, so, I thought I would talk about some things. Our poor education system. I don't blame anybody for not knowing what's going on in the world. I blame our education system. And I don't blame the teachers. Okay? I blame the government. I always blame the government. All right, so I kind of want to go over a tiny little economic lesson. Really quick, easy to understand. So if you don't know what the Federal Reserve is, if you don't understand what a fiat system is or what a gold system is, then I suggest you listen. I'm going to make this as quick as possible. I don't want to make a huge long video. I just want to go over a few things and read an article to you guys so you can understand kind of what's happening in our world right now. And I have to do this quick because it looks like it's going to rain on me. All right, so let's talk about the gold system versus the fiat system, all right, and what that means. So, the gold system. The gold standard is a monetary policy in which a currency is based on a quantity of gold. Basically, money is backed by the hard asset that is gold in order to preserve its value. The government issuing the currency ties its value to to the amount of gold it possesses, hence the desire for gold reserves. All right, that's just the definition. There's the link, take you to the definition. So let's look at what the fiat system is. Now, the fiat system is what we currently are on, all right? How the fiat system works. A fiat system is based on a government's mandate that the paper currency it prints is legal tender for making financial transactions. Legal tender means that the money is backed by the full faith and credit of the government that issues it. In other words, the government promises to be good for it. The government promises. Woo. Okay, so there's the link for that if you want to read more about it. Okay, so fiat system and gold system. One, your dollar bill is worth a piece of paper. The other, your dollar bill is worth that of gold. Okay, so let's talk about inflation. So everyone's heard about inflation. Okay, so price inflation. As inflation increases, the value of your money decreases. So therefore, your $1 bill is not necessarily worth $1. And there's a lot of different factors that go into what your money is worth. From the strength of the economy to if you were to go to Europe or Britain and trade the dollar for the euro, how that works. So what causes this inflation? Increase in a country's money supply. So how do we increase our money supply? Well, the Federal Reserve prints it, okay? The more it prints, the less it's worth, okay? So it's kind of like supply and demand, right? When you don't have a whole lot of something, it's worth a lot. But when you have a whole lot of something, it's not really worth a lot, okay? So let's look at why the Federal Reserve prints money. All right, so the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. All right, and it slowly got to a point where it wasn't backed by gold. And this was mainly, I think it was after the Great Depression, which I think was 1929. Am I right on that? After the Great Depression, they slowly started this fiat system where they were printing a little bit more money to stimulate the economy. Okay, so in the 1970s, when Nixon was president, Nixon eventually cut off the entire gold-backed system, and we came into a full fiat system, okay? So the Federal Reserve basically had 3 goals, and it was called their dual mandate, okay? And they still abide by this. And that is to maximize employment, maintain stable prices throughout the economy, and moderate long-term interest rates, okay? So to maximize employment, the Federal Reserve increases its money supply. That's how it maximizes employment, okay? This causes an increase in inflation and causes interest rates to go up, okay? So when you print a lot of money, there's your inflation. Now your dollar bill is not worth as much as it used to be, okay? So why do interest rates go up? bank loans. So if a bank loans somebody money, they have to pay it back. And there's usually a small interest rate, right? And that is just for mainly for the purpose of borrowing the money. But when interest rates go up, it's because the bank doesn't want to lose the value of the money, of the dollar. So if you borrow money and then you're still paying on the loan 2 years later, but inflation has happened, that's why the interest rate goes up, so that they can kind of, prevent the loss of the value. So they don't want a cheaper dollar coming back as payment. And interest rates help bridge that gap. All right. The Fed can also increase interest rates just to do it, because they can. So when the Fed increases money supply and interest rates, this has a negative impact on the economy. All right. So basically, their dual mandate of maximize employment, maintain stable prices, that doesn't go hand in hand. That doesn't work. Okay, that's like trying to put two magnets together and they just don't want to. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't work. So you can't do both. You can't maximize employment by printing money, because your stable prices have now gone up. Okay, so this also creates a stronger demand for gold, because people want to invest in something that isn't going to fluctuate and is actually worth something. So that's why a lot of people invest in gold, silver, things like that. If you want to read more on that, I have a link at the bottom. I'll put all these links in the description as well. All right, let's move on. So go back to the gold standard. Well, this is let's go over here. This is the link to going back to the gold standard. So the Federal Reserve's, what was his name? Something Powell. Jerome Powell. Okay, so back in this time last year, exactly a year ago, he explains why a return to the gold standard would be so damaging to the economy. Well, let's look at what he said. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told Congress on Wednesday that he doesn't think a return to the gold standard in the U.S. would be a good idea. You've assigned us the job of two direct, real economic objectives: maximize employment, stable prices. If you assigned us to stabilize the dollar price of the gold, monetary policy could do that, but the other things would fluctuate, and we wouldn't care, Powell said from Capitol Hill. We wouldn't care if unemployment went up or down. That wouldn't be our job anymore. There have been plenty of times in fairly recent history where the price of gold has sent a signal that would be quite negative for either of those goals, he said. No other country uses it, he added. The Fed is tasked and overseen by Congress to maximize employment and keep prices stable. Okay, but it obviously doesn't work, and no other country uses it. Well, no other country is the United States either. So that's not really that good of an argument, in my opinion. Sorry, Jerome Powell, not convinced. Okay, so other economists say that if we try to change from the fiat system to the gold system, that it can cause another Great Depression. Okay, so changing from the fiat system to the gold-backed system will cause at least a 5 to 7 year economic crisis due to the fact that we cannot print any money for stimulus. Okay, that's true, unless we create a parallel system behind the scenes, which is exactly what Nixon did in the 1970s before completely abolishing the gold standard. Okay, we went from the gold standard right to that fiat standard because he had created this parallel economy so that when he abolished one, it just flowed right in. All right, so that's still possible today. So why did Nixon abolish the gold standard? All right, so this is the article. Actually, this is the article that I wanted to read you. Okay, so Nixon brought in the petrodollar. We're going to talk about SDR, the Federal Reserve, and the one world system. All right. Now, this is an article, but I'm going to read through it pretty quickly, and I'm going to explain it as I go, and it's very important. All right. So, 1971, President Nixon killed the last remnants of the gold standard. Since then, the dollar has been a pure fiat currency, allowing the Fed to print as many dollars as it pleases. Removing the U.S. dollar's last link to gold eliminated the main motivation for foreign countries to store large dollar reserves and to use the dollar for international trade. They did this because the dollar was backed by gold. It was worth something, okay? So at this point, they got rid of the gold standard, so why in the world would anybody want to use the U.S. dollar anymore, okay? So the demand for the dollar was set to fall. along with the dollar's purchasing power. So the U.S. government concocted a new arrangement to give foreign countries another compelling reason to hold and use the U.S. dollar. The new arrangement, called the petrodollar system, preserved the dollar's special status as the world's reserve currency. Okay? In short, the U.S. government made a series of agreements with Saudi Arabia between 1972 and 1974, which created the petrodollar. What? Really? My child. The Saudis would use their dominant position in OPEC to ensure that all oil transactions would only happen in U.S. dollars, and the U.S. would guarantee the House of Saudi's survival. So that means that they said you can only sell oil using the US dollar, and in exchange, our military will protect you. Okay, so who uses oil? The whole world, right? So that is how they maintained the need for the US dollar without it being backed by gold. All right, so it worked for a while. The petrodollar filled the void after the U.S. severed the dollar's last link to gold as the main prop to the dollar's status as the world's premier reserve currency. So far, the petrodollar has lasted over 40 years. However, the glue is losing its stick. I think we're on the cusp of another paradigm shift in the international financial system, a change at least as fundamental as what happened in 1971, when Nixon severed the dollar's last link to gold. The relationship between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. hit historic lows in 2016. I only expect it to get worse. Trump is the first president since the petrodollar system was enacted to be openly hostile toward the Saudis. So why is Trump against the Saudis? Well, his tweets right here kind of tell you why. Okay, so Saudi Arabia oil was attacked. Their supply was attacked. There is reason to believe that we know the culprit, are locked and loaded depending on verification, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed. Because we have done so well with energy over the last few years, we are a net energy exporter and now the #1 energy producer in the world. We don't need Middle Eastern oil and gas, and in fact have very few tankers there, but will help our allies. So basically what Trump is saying is, we don't need to purchase oil from the Middle East. Why are we going to import something that we can produce right here in America? Okay, that has been Trump's platform for the most part of his platform that he's ran on is, we don't need China. We don't need the Middle East. We can do everything here in America. We need to bring companies back to America, right? And that's part of it. Well, the Saudis didn't like that. Even though Trump said, we'll still keep our deal with you and we'll still protect you. We'll still protect you. But he's not going to continue to purchase oil. Now, there's a whole story behind that and why our gas prices dropped in the beginning of the year to 99 cents a gallon. That's the lowest I saw it. That's a whole nother story. All right, so let's keep going. So the death of the petrodollar system is my #1 black swan event for this year. It raises the question, what will fill the void when the petrodollar inevitably dies? When that happens, and it may be imminent, something has to replace it. I think there are only two options. Naturally, the global elite want to centralize more power into global institutions. In this case, that means the International Monetary Fund. I know y'all have heard of that because I've heard of that, okay? Even though we may not know what it meant, we've heard of it, right? Okay, so the IMF issues a type of international currency called the Special Drawing Right, or SDR. The SDR is nothing new. The globalists have been slowly building it up since 1969. That sure is awfully close to 1971 when Nixon demolished the gold-backed system. In the near future, it could be used as the premier international currency, the role the dollar has played since the end of World War II. The SDR is simply a basket of other fiat currencies. The US dollar makes up 42%, the euro 31%, the Chinese renminbi 11%, the Japanese yen 8%, and the British pound 8%. Okay? It's a fiat currency based on other fiat currencies, a floating abstraction based on other floating abstractions. Okay? It's not backed by anything. If for some reason the economy tanked right now, what would your dollar bills be worth? Probably that much of toilet paper. But if it was backed by gold, what would it be worth? Gold. You see the difference between a gold back and a fiat? A fiat is a promise from the government that your money is worth something. It's a trickery of sorts. Okay? So let's keep going. The SDR, the SDR is not based on sound economics or the interests of the common man. It's just another cockamamie invention of the economic witch doctors in academia and government. Let me read that again. In academia and government. I would have to make 1,000 videos to explain the corruption in our government. The SDR is dangerous. It gives the government, in this case a global government, more power. It's a bridge to a powerful global monetary authority and eventually a global currency. Let's look at that real quick. Why is a one world government, which was a conspiracy theory, why is a one world government and a one world currency and one world military, and one world anything, why is that not okay? Some people are like, well, I don't understand the big deal. What's the big deal? Well, tyranny. If you have one leader that leads the entire planet, who is going to fight against him if he decides to enslave the people? Nobody. There is nobody. That's why one world government is not okay. All right? Having several governments across the world that have their own militaries, that prevents people like Hitler from doing what he did. Okay? That allowed for, that's what World War II was about, right? And we got rid of him, right? Not really, but the world thinks we did. I mean, he's dead now, it doesn't matter, but a whole nother trickery. Oh, that's another video. But yeah, we don't want a one world government, all right? So most decent people would consider this a bad thing. That's why the global elite cloud their scheme with dull and opaque names like special drawing rate. Okay, it's an old trick. Governments have used it for eons. The Federal Reserve is an excellent example. After 2 failed central banking experiments in the 1800s, look them up, anything associated with a central bank became deeply unpopular with the American public. So central bank advocates tried a fresh branding strategy. Rather than call their new central bank the third bank of the United States, the previous two were the first and second banks of the United States, they gave it a vague and boring name. They called it the Federal Reserve and managed to hide it in plain sight from the average person. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve. Okay, not only were the people against central banking, but the 3 most wealthy and powerful men in the world were against it. I'm going to tell you their names, and you're going to say, why does that sound familiar? Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Strauss, John Jacob Astor II. Okay? These 3 men were against the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was created December 23rd, 1913. I want you to try to put your brain together to put that together. And if you can figure it out, put it in the comments. Okay? So, nearly 100 years later, most Americans don't have the slightest clue what the Federal Reserve is, what it does, or how it has eroded their standard of living. Did you know the Federal Reserve isn't owned by the United States, or it's owned privately by the Rockefellers? So, I think the same dynamic is at work with the IMF's special drawing right. The breakdown of the petrodollar is the perfect excuse for the globalists to usher in their SDR solution. So that's the first option. It's the global elite's preferred outcome. It would be a very bad thing for personal and economic freedom. It means more fiat currency, more centralization, and less freedom for the individual. The second option is to simply return to gold as the premier international money. Here's how it could happen. Trump might play along with the globalist schemes, but I doubt it. He's the first president who's openly and sincerely hostile toward globalism. He's denounced it repeatedly. Trump recently said, "We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism." I don't even like that word, apparently. In my view, there's only one way Trump could fight the global elites and their SDR plan. Return the dollar to some sort of gold backing. You can look it up. He has been for this since the very beginning, even before he was president. Trump has said favorable things about gold in the past, so have some of his advisors. It wouldn't be easy. He'd face one hell of a struggle with the globalists, and winning would be far from certain. Isn't that what we see him now, fighting them? Who are the globalists? They own the media, don't they? They own the narrative right now, don't they? But you're still listening to them. You're still fooled, right? Okay, so no matter what, the death of the petrodollar, just like the end of the dollar's link to gold, will be very good for the dollar price of gold and gold mining stocks. When Nixon took the dollar off gold in 1971, gold skyrocketed over 2,000%. It shot from $35 an ounce to a high of $850 in 1980. Gold mining stocks did even better. Gold is still bouncing around its lows. Gold mining stocks are still very cheap. I expect returns to be at least as great as they were during the paradigm shift in the international monetary system. Everything could soon change in sudden, unexpected ways. This is exactly why legendary investor and best-selling author Doug Casey put together a time-sensitive video explaining how it could all go down. So I'm going to put this link in the description, and you guys go to it and you click here to watch it now. And you watch that video, okay? Now, Joe Biden's economic plan. I don't really have to go over it all. I can just tell you this one piece. Okay, his plan's a lot bigger than this. I'm not saying this is his plan. But he has no intentions of backing our dollar by gold. His intentions lie with the global elites and the SDR. And his intentions, he wants to give everybody $15 an hour minimum wage. So let's talk about what happens when you raise minimum wage. Okay, he also, I didn't put this on here, but he also wants to raise taxes of corporate companies, right? So now I'm an owner of a business and I have to now pay more taxes. I also have to now pay my people a minimum of $15 an hour, which means those that have earned tenure or are in management positions, I have to pay even more than that. So guess what? I can't afford to pay your health insurance. I also can't afford to employ all of the people. So I'm going to have to do layoffs. And now I'm going to have to raise the prices of my products. So if I'm a grocery store, my bottle of ketchup that costs, what, $1.49? I'm going to have to raise that to about $6.99. Do you think that's good for the economy? Do you think doing this allows for growth? Do you think people would be able to survive? Do you think the country would be able to survive? Do you think this would allow companies to this would allow owners to bring their companies back to America? I'm going to let you sit on that. And I'm going to end this video here. And I'm going to do another video. We're going to talk about who exactly are the global elites and how they tie into the Federal Reserve and how those three men I named earlier that I told you to think about and how that comes into play. And if there's anything you want to add, you can leave it in the comments. But let this be a good economic lesson to you on who maybe you should vote for in November.